The observation deck of the Crethani warship hummed with its usual low frequency, a sound that made human teeth ache if they listened too long. But Sarah Chen had grown used to it over the past 3 months. She sat cross-legged on the cushioned platform the crew had installed for her, the only concession to human comfort in a ship designed for beings twice her size with triple-jointed legs. Her silver brush moved through her long black hair in steady strokes, working out the tangles from sleep. It was a morning ritual she refused to give up, even here, millions of light years from Earth. The simple act of brushing her hair connected her to home, to her grandmother who had taught her to care for it properly, to normalcy in a universe that had proven to be anything but normal. She didn't notice the 3 pairs of eyes watching her from the doorway. The Crethani cubs had been following Sarah for weeks now. Their names were Rax, Keela, and Torn, though Sarah had taken to calling them Rocky, Kiki, and Tommy in her head. The translation implants made communication possible, but nicknames felt more natural to her human sensibilities. They were the offspring of Commander Vrath, the ship's tactical officer, and they treated the warship like their personal jungle gym. Crethani were apex predators from a death world that made Earth look like a petting zoo. Standing nearly 8 feet tall when fully grown, they possessed retractable claws, powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, and muscular bodies built for explosive speed and strength. Their fur ranged from deep charcoal to rust red, marked with stripe patterns that helped them blend into their home planet's iron-rich forests. By all accounts, they were terrifying. But these cubs were only 4 standard years old, roughly equivalent to human 6-year-olds in development, and they were absolutely fascinated by the strange little human who had come aboard their ship. Rax, the largest of the 3 with dark gray fur and white markings around his eyes, tilted his head as he watched Sarah's repetitive motion. The brush moved from the top of her head down to the ends of her hair, over and over. His tail twitched with curiosity. Keela, smaller with reddish-brown fur, pressed closer to get a better view, nearly pushing Torn into the corridor. Torn, the youngest and most cautious, watched from behind his siblings with wide, golden eyes. Sarah set down her brush and began braiding her hair, her fingers moving with practiced ease. She wove 3 sections together, creating a pattern that spiraled down past her shoulders. The cubs watched in complete silence, their natural predatory stillness making them perfect observers. When Sarah finished and secured the braid with an elastic band, she finally caught sight of the 3 small faces peering around the doorframe. She jumped slightly, then laughed. "How long have you 3 been standing there?" The cubs didn't run like they usually did when caught spying. Instead, Rax stepped forward, his small claws clicking on the metal floor. "What were you doing?" he asked, his voice coming out as a series of growls and chirps that the translator converted to perfect English. Sarah held up her brush. "Brushing my hair." "Then braiding it. It's something humans do to keep our hair neat and healthy." "Why?" Keela pushed past her brother, her whiskers twitching with interest. "Does it make you stronger?" Sarah smiled. The Crethani measured everything in terms of combat effectiveness and survival advantage. "Not stronger exactly, but it keeps it from getting tangled and matted. And it feels nice." Torn finally crept into the room, staying close to his siblings. It looked like a ritual, like when warriors prepare for battle. "I suppose it is a kind of ritual," Sarah admitted. "Taking care of yourself is important, even in small ways, especially in small ways sometimes." Rax moved closer, his eyes fixed on the brush. "Can we try?" Sarah blinked. She had expected many things from the fearsome Crethani, but not this. "You want to brush your fur?" "Yes." Rax's tail swished with excitement. "Show us how." Sarah looked at the 3 cubs, seeing the eagerness in their alien faces. She thought about the cultural exchange briefings she had sat through before accepting this assignment. Building bridges between species. Finding common ground. Who knew that common ground would be personal grooming? Okay, she said slowly. But you have fur, not hair. I'm not sure my brush will work the same way. Try. Keela bounced on her powerful legs. Please try. Sarah stood and approached Rax carefully. Even as a cub, he was nearly as tall as she was. She held up the brush. This might feel weird. Tell me if it hurts, okay? Rax nodded, standing very still. Sarah gently drew the brush through the fur on his arm. The bristles caught on the dense double coat, but they moved through. Rax's eyes widened. A low rumbling sound came from his chest, purring. Sarah had learned that Crithani cubs purred when content, a trait they lost as adults. That feels strange, Rax said, but he didn't move away. Do it more. Sarah brushed a few more strokes, and Rax's purring grew louder. Keela pushed forward. My turn, my turn. For the next several minutes, Sarah carefully brushed each of the cubs, running the bristles through their thick fur. They all purred, their dangerous claws retracting completely as they relaxed under her attention. Torn, despite his initial shyness, leaned into the brushing with his eyes half closed in contentment. This is very nice, Keela said dreamily. Why don't we do this? Your people probably have their own grooming methods, Sarah explained. Humans developed brushes because of how our hair grows, but every species takes care of themselves differently. Rax suddenly perked up, his predatory instincts returning in a flash. Can we have brushes? Can we brush each other? Sarah considered this. She only had one hairbrush and it was special to her, but she could see something important happening here. These cubs were learning something about care and gentleness, concepts that didn't come naturally to a warrior species. I can't give you mine, she said carefully, watching Rax's ears droop. But I bet we could fabricate some grooming tools in the ship's workshop. Would you like that? All three cubs chittered with excitement, their tails lashing. Yes! When? Now? Sarah laughed. Let me talk to your father first, and you need to understand something important. Grooming isn't just about the brushing. It's about taking care of each other, being gentle, being patient. Can you do that? The cubs looked at each other, then nodded solemnly. We can be gentle, Torn said quietly. We practice gentle with the small maintenance drones. Sarah felt a surge of affection for these young predators. All right, then. Let's go find Commander Vrath. The walk to the tactical bay was an adventure. The cubs bounded ahead, then circled back, then raced forward again, their excess energy demanding release. Sarah followed at her human pace, nodding to the adult Crithani crew members they passed. She had earned a measure of respect aboard the ship by refusing to show fear and by treating everyone with the same courtesy she would offer humans. Commander Vrath stood at his station, reviewing tactical displays with his first officer. He was massive even for a Crithani, with battle scars marking his dark fur and one of his ears torn from a past conflict. When he saw Sarah approaching with his cubs bouncing around her, his expression softened in a way that few non-Crithani would recognize. Ambassador Chen, he rumbled. The translator made his voice sound formal, but Sarah had learned to hear the warmth underneath. What have my cubs gotten into now? They watched me brush my hair this morning, Sarah explained, and now they want grooming tools of their own. Vrath's ears flicked forward in surprise. Grooming tools? Rax jumped forward. Father, the human has a special tool that makes her hair smooth and neat. She used it on us and it felt wonderful. We want to groom each other like she grooms herself. Vrath looked from his excited cubs to Sarah, his golden eyes unreadable. For a moment, Sarah worried she had crossed some cultural boundary. Then Vrath's mouth opened in what she had learned was a Crethani smile. "This is unexpected," he said, "but not unwelcome. Our cubs usually learn grooming behaviors from their parents, but they have resisted when I have tried to teach them. They think themselves too grown for such things." "It's different when a friend shows you," Sarah suggested. "And when it looks like a new game?" Vrath nodded slowly. "You understand cubs well, Ambassador." "Very well. Come. The fabrication bay can make suitable tools." They made their way through the ship, drawing curious looks from the crew. The sight of the human ambassador, the tactical commander, and 3 bouncing cubs was unusual enough to turn heads. In the fabrication bay, Vrath discussed requirements with the technician, while Sarah described what might work for Crethani fur. The technician, an older female named Chakra with silver streaking her rust-colored fur, seemed amused by the whole situation. "In my youth," she said, "we used bone combs carved by our mothers, but metal bristles will work better for our dense coats." Within an hour, 3 grooming tools emerged from the fabricator. They looked like curry combs used for horses back on Earth, with short metal teeth set in oval handles sized for cub paws. Chakra had even added decorative etchings to each one, different for each cub. Rax grabbed his immediately, nearly dropping it in his excitement. Keela and Torn were more careful, examining their new tools with serious expressions. "Now," Vrath said, his voice taking on the tone of instruction, "you must remember what Ambassador Chen told you. Grooming is about care, about pack bonding. You must be gentle with each other, or you will not be allowed to keep these." The cubs nodded solemnly, understanding that this was important. Sarah knelt down to their level. "Why don't you try grooming each other? Start gentle, and pay attention to whether it feels good or if it hurts." There was a moment of awkward hesitation. Then Keela approached Torn, who was closest to her in size. "Can I try on you?" Torn nodded, sitting down and offering his back. Keela carefully drew the grooming tool through her brother's fur. The first stroke was too rough, making Torn yip. Keela immediately stopped, her ears flattening apologetically. "More gentle," Sarah coached. "Like when I did it. Let the tool glide." Keela tried again, softer this time. Torn's tail relaxed. "That's better," he said. Rax moved to Keela, and soon all 3 cubs were engaged in a circle of grooming, each one taking turns being groomed and grooming another. Their purring filled the fabrication bay, a sound that made several passing crew members pause and look in with surprise. Sarah stood back with Vrath and Chakra, watching the cubs carefully work on each other's fur. They were learning, adjusting their pressure, finding the rhythms that felt good. Occasionally, one would get too rough and be corrected by a yelp, but they were remarkably patient with each other. "This is not what I expected when I requested a human cultural liaison," Vrath said quietly. "The council told me humans were useful for their different perspective. I did not think that perspective would extend to teaching my cubs gentleness through grooming." "Humans are good at finding unexpected connections," Sarah replied. "We've had to be. We spent most of our history as prey animals who somehow became persistence hunters. We understand what it means to be both vulnerable and fierce." Chakra rumbled thoughtfully. "The cubs needed this. Our species is strong, but strength without care becomes cruelty. They must learn both." Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened aboard the Crethani warship. The cubs' new grooming routine became a daily ritual. Every evening, they would gather in one of their quarters and spend an hour carefully grooming each other. Their small voices chattering about their day while their paws worked through fur, and their purring echoed through the corridors. But the effect didn't stop with the cubs. Other young Crethani on the ship began to show interest. The practice spread quietly at first, then more openly. Adult crew members who had long abandoned such childish activities found themselves watching the cubs with something like nostalgia. Sarah walked into the observation deck one evening to find a surprising sight. Commander Vrath sat with his cubs, and they were carefully grooming their father's scarred fur while he purred deeply, his fierce warrior's face relaxed in contentment. It was a side of the Crethani that few species had ever witnessed. "Ambassador," Vrath said when he noticed her, "my mate wants to thank you. She says the cubs have been calmer, more focused in their studies. They fight less with each other." Sarah smiled. "Grooming does that. It's bonding time, and it teaches patience." Rax looked up from his work on his father's shoulder. "Sarah, will you teach us the braiding, the pattern you make with your hair?" "That might be tricky with fur," Sarah said doubtfully. "But we want to try," Keela insisted. "It looked like a warrior's pattern, like honor markings." Sarah considered this. Braiding was deeply personal to her, tied to memories of her grandmother's hands in her hair, to quiet mornings and whispered stories. But wasn't that exactly what she was seeing here? The cubs learning to care for each other, building their own memories and traditions? "All right," she said. "Let's try." She sat down with the cubs and demonstrated on her own hair again, going slowly so they could see how 3 sections wove together. The cubs watched intently, their predatory focus locked on her movements. Then they tried on each other. It was chaos at first. Fur didn't braid like hair. It was too short in some places, too thick in others. But the cubs persisted, and eventually Torn managed to create something resembling a braid along Keela's spine, using the longer fur there. Keela strutted around the room, showing off her new decoration. "Look! I have a warrior's pattern." Other young Crethani began visiting the observation deck, drawn by curiosity and the sound of the cubs' excited voices. Sarah found herself teaching impromptu grooming lessons, showing techniques that worked with Crethani physiology. The ship's doctor even got involved, pointing out health benefits of regular fur maintenance. The practice spread beyond the young ones. Sarah observed adult crew members grooming each other during off-duty hours, something that apparently hadn't been common in Crethani military culture. The atmosphere on the ship changed subtly. There was more patience, more social bonding, fewer conflicts. The captain, an ancient female named Crethnar who had commanded vessels for 50 years, called Sarah to her ready room. "Ambassador Chen," the captain said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "You have done something remarkable." Sarah felt nervous under that intense golden gaze. "I just taught the cubs to brush their fur, Captain." "No." Crethnar stood, moving to the viewport that showed the stars. "You taught them care. You taught them that warriors can be gentle with each other. You reminded my crew of something we lost when we became a purely military society." She turned back to Sarah. "Do you know what we gave up when we took to the stars as conquerors?" Sarah shook her head. "Softness, not weakness, but softness. The ability to touch each other without violence, to spend time in each other's company without purpose or mission. We became efficient, deadly, and lonely." The captain's ears drooped slightly. "Your species calls us apex predators. You fear us. Yet you sat with our cubs and showed them how to be kind." "Kindness and strength aren't opposites," Sarah said quietly. "The strongest people I've ever known were kind. It takes more courage to be gentle than to be fierce." Crethnar's expression shifted into a Crethani smile. "This is why the council was wise to insist on cultural exchange. You teach us things we forgot we needed." Months later, when Sarah was finally preparing to return to Earth, the cubs brought her a gift. It was a grooming tool, beautifully crafted and decorated with intricate carvings. The handle was sized for human hands, and the bristles were perfect for human hair. "We made it ourselves," Rax said proudly. "In the workshop, Chakra showed us how to do the carvings." The carvings depicted 3 cubs and a human, braiding and grooming together. Sarah felt tears threatening. "This is beautiful. Thank you," Keela pressed close, careful of her claws. "Will you remember us?" "Every day," Sarah promised. "Every time I brush my hair." Torn, still the quietest, spoke up. "We learned important things from you. About being gentle. About taking care of each other." "You taught me too," Sarah said truthfully. "You taught me that connection can happen anywhere, even between species that seem totally different. You taught me that everyone needs gentleness, even predators." Commander Vrath appeared in the doorway. "The shuttle is ready, Ambassador." Sarah stood, holding her precious gift. The cubs walked with her to the hangar bay, along with dozens of crew members who had gathered to see her off. Young Crethani were grooming each other openly now, and even some adults had formed grooming groups. As Sarah's shuttle departed, she looked back at the warship through the viewport. She thought about 3 curious cubs who had watched her brush her hair and wanted to try something new. She thought about how such a small thing had rippled through an entire ship's culture. Sometimes the most important bridges between species weren't built through grand diplomatic gestures or treaties. Sometimes they were built through simple acts of care, through showing someone how you take care of yourself and inviting them to try the same. Sarah ran her fingers over the carved handle of her new brush and smiled. Somewhere on that warship, 3 cubs were probably grooming each other right now, learning lessons about gentleness and care that they would carry into adulthood. And maybe, just maybe, they would teach those lessons to their own cubs someday. The universe was vast and full of predators, but it was also full of opportunities for connection, for understanding, for teaching each other new ways to be strong. All it took was patience, kindness, and the willingness to share something as simple as how you brushed your hair.